The morning Nadia showed up at my door with a casserole dish and a look on her face like someone had died, I knew something was wrong. She wasn't the kind of woman who cooked. She ordered. She hired people to order. So when she stood there on my porch in Montrose, with a Pyrex dish covered in aluminum foil and mascara slightly smudged beneath her left eye, my stomach dropped before she even said a word. "Just tell me," I said. She told me. His name was Vincent Harlow, and he was not who I thought he was. I should back up. My name is Leigh Callahan. I'm 33 years old. I run a physical therapy clinic out of a converted Victorian on West Alabama Street, and I have a 4-year-old daughter named Addie who is, without question, the best decision I have ever made. She has my dark hair, a gap between her front teeth that her pediatric dentist says will close on its own, and a laugh that sounds like someone shaking a jar of pennies. Chaotic and bright and completely impossible to ignore. Her father and I were never together, not in any meaningful way. I want to be clear about that before anything else, because the story has a tendency to sound messier than it was. The truth is simple, even if the aftermath isn't. I was 30 years old, I had no partner, I had a practice I'd built from nothing, and I wanted a child. I'd wanted one since I was 24. I wasn't going to keep waiting for circumstances to align perfectly, because I had watched my mother do exactly that, and she died at 61 without ever taking the trip to Portugal she'd been planning for 30 years. So I started researching co-parenting arrangements. Not a donor, not anonymous, not clinical. I'd read enough about the complications of anonymous conception to know I didn't want that for Addie. I wanted her to have the option of knowing where she came from. I found a co-parenting site, vetted it carefully, spent 3 months reading profiles and asking questions and talking to a therapist and a reproductive attorney before I agreed to meet anyone. Vincent messaged me in January. His profile said he was 38, a consultant in commercial real estate, divorced with no children, based in Houston. He was direct in his messages without being aggressive. He answered every question I sent him about his health history, his family background, his intentions, with what felt like patience and a kind of seriousness I hadn't found in the other men I'd corresponded with. We video called twice. We met once for coffee at a place on Kirby, where I picked the table near the window so I could see the door. He was tall, quieter in person than on video. He ordered black coffee and didn't offer to pay for mine, which I took as a sign that he was reading the situation correctly, that this was a meeting, not a date. He listened more than he talked. When I explained what I was looking for, he nodded slowly and said, "I want to be honest with you about something." I held very still. "I don't want to be a father in the traditional sense," he said. "I've thought about it a lot. But I also don't want to be nothing. I'd want to know the child was healthy. I'd want to be reachable if the child wanted to find me someday. But the day-to-day, that's yours." I'd support that fully, financially and otherwise. It was exactly what I'd hoped someone would say, which, in retrospect, should have made me more suspicious. Things that land exactly right almost never do. We signed an agreement through my attorney. It was thorough, 18 pages covering financial responsibility, parental rights, disclosure to the child at an age-appropriate time, contact protocols. He signed without asking for a single revision. 6 months later, Addie was born on a Tuesday at 2:14 in the afternoon, 7 pounds even, perfectly healthy, and she cried so hard and so immediately that the nurse laughed. Vincent sent flowers to the hospital, a simple arrangement, white peonies, with a card that just said, "Congratulations." I thought it was exactly right. I thought I'd made a good decision. I was right about the most important part. Addie is the proof of that, but I was wrong about Vincent Harlow in almost every other way. He came into our life slowly, the way cold water comes into a room from under a door. You don't notice it until you're standing in it. In the beginning, it was just the occasional check-in, a text every few months asking how Addie was doing. I sent photos. He responded with brief, appropriate replies. When Addie was 18 months old, he asked if he could meet her, and I said I wanted to wait until she was a little older, a little more able to process a new person in a context I'd have to explain. He accepted that without pushing. I remember thinking that was respectful. When Addie was 2.5, I agreed to a meeting, a park Saturday morning, my neighborhood. He arrived with a stuffed rabbit and a coffee for me, oat milk latte, which he'd apparently remembered from our meeting 3 years before. I noticed that. Addie was shy for about 7 minutes and then tried to show him how fast she could run, which she consistently overestimates. After that, we started meeting maybe once every 6 or 8 weeks. Always public places, always with me present, always on my terms. He never pushed for more. He was good with her, not performatively, not with the over-the-top enthusiasm that always reads as compensation for discomfort, just genuinely calm and present. He'd get on the ground with her. He remembered things she'd told him and asked follow-up questions the next time. I let my guard down, not all at once. Gradually, which is somehow worse, because you don't notice it happening. He started texting me occasionally outside of the Addie-related check-ins. A link to an article about a new treatment approach for ACL rehab he thought my practice might find interesting. A question about whether I'd tried a restaurant that had opened near my clinic. Small things, friendly things, I responded. It felt easy. It felt natural. When Addie was 3, I let him take her to the park alone for the first time. Just 2 hours, just 3 blocks from my house. I stood in my kitchen and tried to read a journal article and couldn't. He brought her back with ice cream on her shirt and a detailed accounting of everything she'd said and done, which she interrupted constantly to correct. He stayed for 20 minutes. When he left, Addie waved from the window until his car turned the corner. That was 8 months ago. Nadia is my best friend. We met in grad school at UT Houston, 2 people in adjacent programs who ended up in the same study room one February because every other seat in the building was taken. She is a forensic accountant now, which she describes as making sure rich people's lies add up, and she is very good at it. She knows how to find things that is relevant. She had been uneasy about Vincent for a while. I knew it. She never said it directly. Nadia operates obliquely, in hints and silences, and the particular way she changes the subject, but I felt it. I told myself she was overprotective. I had done my due diligence. I had an attorney. I had a signed agreement. I had been careful. What I didn't know was that she'd been careful too, on her own, for months. "You need to sit down," she said when she came in that morning. "I'm already sitting." I was on the kitchen floor, actually, because Addie had demanded I sit at her level while she explained the rules of a game she'd invented that had no discernible logic. Addie had since lost interest and wandered toward her room. Nadia set the casserole on my counter. She sat down across from me on the floor, which told me everything about how serious she was before she said another word. "The commercial real estate consulting?" she said. "It's real. He does do that. But that's not the core of it, Leigh." I didn't say anything. "You know Harlow Capital? They have a building on McKinney, couple other properties around the city?" "Vaguely. Vincent Harlow is the Harlow in Harlow Capital. But the capital isn't from real estate." She paused. "Or not originally. What is it from?" She looked at me with the expression she reserves for when she has to say something that cannot be unsaid. "Money laundering. Specifically for a network operating out of Galveston that the FBI has been tracking for approximately 6 years. Private port access, shell companies, legitimate business fronts. Real estate is one of the fronts." The floor felt very solid under me. "How certain are you?" I asked. "I didn't find this on my own," she said. "I found enough on my own to get worried, and then I called someone I know from a financial crimes task force. He talked to me off the record. He was very clear that it's not a suspicion. Vincent Harlow is a named subject in an active federal investigation. Has been since before you met him. I thought about the 18 pages. I thought about white peonies." "Does he know they're watching him?" I asked. "Probably. People like that usually do." I looked at the hallway where Addie had disappeared. I could hear her narrating something to her rabbit. Her voice rose and fell in the particular cadence she used when she was giving instructions. Very serious, very patient. "She's been alone with him," I said. "I know. 8 months ago, I let him take her to the park by himself." "I know." I pressed my hand flat on the floor and focused on the cold of the tile until I could breathe correctly. The question I couldn't stop asking myself, over the days that followed, was whether any of it had been real. Not romantic. I want to be clear that I was not in love with Vincent Harlow. But I had trusted him with Addie. I had believed that I was a person who could read people, who had been careful, who had done the research and asked the questions and signed the papers. I had believed I knew what I was doing. The doubt that moved in to replace that belief was different from ordinary doubt. It didn't argue with me. It just sat there. I called my attorney, Helena, the morning after Nadia's visit. Helena is 62, sharp as broken glass, and she has handled complicated family law situations for 30 years. She did not panic. She told me to come in, and when I did, she listened to everything I said and then was quiet for a moment. "This doesn't change the agreement," she said, "but it changes what we do next. You have reason to request suspension of his contact under the safety provisions we included. He hasn't done anything to Addie. He's been good with her." "I know that. But you have the right to protect her from association with a federal investigation. That's not a small thing. That's reputational risk, at minimum. At maximum." She stopped. "You know what the maximum is." "I did. I don't want to blow this up if I don't have to," I said. "Addie knows him. She likes him. She'd notice if he disappeared." Helena nodded slowly. "Then we need to be strategic. Let me find out what I can about the investigation timeline through appropriate channels. In the meantime, you don't deny contact. You just don't facilitate it. Let him initiate. Don't reach out. If he pushes, you have a child with a mild illness, a busy schedule. Buy us some time." I didn't like it. It felt like deception, and I had built my entire arrangement with Vincent on the principle that I wouldn't deceive him. But I also had a 4-year-old who had started sleeping with the stuffed rabbit he'd brought her, who called him by his first name in the easy way children say the names of people they've decided matter. I bought the time. He texted 9 days later, casual, asking if Addie had gotten over her cold. I'd told him she was under the weather. I said she was better, that things had been hectic, that we'd circle back about the next visit. He replied, "Of course, no rush, let me know." And then, 3 days after that, he called. Not texted, called. I let it ring through to voicemail. He didn't leave one. He called again that evening. I answered. "Is everything okay?" he asked. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it that I couldn't name. An attention, like he was listening very carefully to how I answered. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just busy, Leigh." A pause. "I'd like to see you." "Not Addie, you. Can we meet for coffee?" My heart did something complicated. Why? Because I think there's something you know that we should probably talk about. The silence that followed lasted longer than it should have. "How about Saturday?" I said. I told Nadia. She told me I was out of my mind. I told her I needed to know what he was going to say, and that knowing was always better than not knowing, which is something I believe about medicine and apparently also about this. She insisted on sitting 2 tables away, which I allowed. He was already there when I arrived. Black coffee again. He looked the same. That was the disconcerting part. He looked exactly the same as he had every other time I'd seen him. Calm, present. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You made it sound like I needed to." He wrapped both hands around his cup. "I think you've been told something about me." I didn't answer. "I'm not going to ask what you know," he said. "I'm not going to pretend it isn't true. I'm telling you that because I think you deserve honesty, and because I'm aware that what I'm about to ask is significant." "What are you about to ask?" "I need you to keep Addie away from me for a while." He said it plainly, without drama. "I don't mean forever. I mean, there are things happening that I can't fully explain to you right now, and it's better for her if there's distance between us until those things resolve. I would have told you sooner, but I wasn't certain until recently." I stared at him. "You're coming to me," I said slowly. "You are coming to me and telling me to keep her away from you. Yes, because something is about to happen." He didn't say yes. He also didn't say no. "Are you in danger?" I asked. He looked out the window for a moment. The light was coming in sideways, the way it does on a November morning in Houston when the sun is low and the city looks briefly like it's made of copper. "I'm managing a situation," he said, "but there's some uncertainty in how it resolves. And I would rather Addie not be near that uncertainty. How long? I don't know. Months, maybe less." I thought about what Helena had said, investigation timeline. I thought about what I'd told myself about being a person who could read people. "Why do you care about her?" I asked. It came out more raw than I intended. He was quiet for a moment. She's mine, he said, not possessively, not legally, just as a fact. I've never been someone's the way I'm hers. I know that sounds. I know how it sounds. The thing about Vincent Harlow, the thing I couldn't reconcile no matter how hard I tried, was that he was both things simultaneously. He was a man involved in things I couldn't let near my daughter. And he was also a man who got on the ground at the park to watch her demonstrate how fast she could run, who remembered that I took oat milk, who had come to me voluntarily to ask me to protect a 4-year-old from the fallout of his own life. "What do you need from me?" I said finally. "Nothing. I mean that. This isn't a request for cover or assistance. I wanted you to know from me, not from whoever told you." "How did you know someone told me?" "Because you went quiet," he said. "And you don't go quiet." He left before I finished my coffee. Nadia appeared at my table approximately 4 seconds after the door closed behind him, sat down and looked at me. "Well," she said, "he told me to keep Addie away from him." She blinked. "He told you?" "Yes, voluntarily, apparently." She sat back, processed. "Okay," she said finally. I did not see that coming. Neither did I." Helena confirmed 2 weeks later that a federal indictment was likely within the quarter. She didn't tell me how she knew. The case had been building for a long time, and from what she could determine through channels she declined to name, Vincent Harlow was not the primary target. He was adjacent, entangled in a structure that predated him by at least a decade. That didn't make him innocent. It didn't make any of it clean. But it did complicate the narrative of him that I'd been rewriting in my head since Nadia came to my door with her casserole dish and her smudged mascara. I didn't contact him. He didn't contact me. The weeks went by with the particular feeling of weather you can see coming from a long distance, something building at the edge of the sky that you track without being able to stop it. Addie asked about him once, on a Thursday evening while I was braiding her hair for bed. "Is Vincent coming soon?" she asked. "Not right now. Bug. Why? He's busy with some grown-up stuff." She considered this with the seriousness she applies to all information. "Okay," she said. "Will he come back?" "I think so. Good." She went back to sitting still for the braid. "I want to show him my shoes." She had new shoes. Light-up soles, purple with Velcro because she was still working on the lace situation. She'd been waiting to show various people. Her preschool teacher, Nadia, her pediatrician. Now Vincent. I kept braiding. The indictment came down on a Wednesday in March, and I read about it on my phone during a 15-minute gap between patients. Vincent's name was in the 4th paragraph. He was not the primary subject. He was described as a facilitator. The charges were serious. His attorney, according to the brief quote at the end of the article, was planning to contest vigorously. I sat the article open for a while and then put my phone face down on my desk. My next patient was a 60-year-old man rehabbing his shoulder after rotator cuff surgery. He was a retired firefighter who told the same 3 jokes every session and laughed hardest at his own punchlines. I went in and we worked through his range of motion exercises, and he told his jokes, and I laughed in the right places, and for an hour the world was exactly the size it needed to be. He sent one message, not to my phone, to the email address I'd given him when we first began corresponding years ago, which I checked less frequently now. I found it 11 days after the indictment, which means he'd sent it before the charges came down, maybe in anticipation. It said, "Addie's rabbit is named Gerald, in case she hasn't told you. She told me at the park last spring, and I think she assumed I'd remember and would want to know. The situation I mentioned is going to become public soon. I imagine you'll have questions at some point. Probably Addie will too, eventually, when she's old enough. I want you to know I'll answer them honestly, whatever I can answer. I don't think honesty is supposed to be conditional on convenience, even when it costs something. Take care of yourselves." I read it twice. I read it a 3rd time. I closed the email and went to start dinner. Addie was in the living room with Gerald, who I had indeed known was named Gerald, because she'd told me 16 times. She was explaining something to him in her instruction voice. Very patient, very thorough. "He's not listening," she reported when I passed by. "Rabbits are hard to reach," I said. "He listens sometimes. I believe you." I stood there for a moment watching her, the low afternoon light through the blinds, her gap-toothed profile, the way she held Gerald with one arm while gesturing with the other, making her point. There would be more to figure out. There were already things I couldn't answer, about what I'd tell Addie when she was older, about what Vincent would look like on the other side of whatever the next months held for him, about whether the man who'd asked me to protect my daughter from his own life was someone she would eventually deserve to know, or someone I'd have to slowly, carefully explain. I didn't have those answers. I had a clinic that opened at 7 in the morning, and a daughter who needed dinner, and a stuffed rabbit named Gerald who didn't always listen, and the particular kind of clarity that comes not from knowing what happens next, but from knowing what you're doing right now. Right now, I was making pasta. Addie wanted shells. I put the water on to boil and let the rest of it wait.